The Premier League relegation battle is starting to get interesting. Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to yet another video. As I've just said, we are talking about the Premier League relegation battle again today and looking at which three teams might be going down from the Premier League to the Championship. Before we dive straight into things, guys, get down in the comments. Let me know which three teams you think will be going down from the Premier League to the Championship this season. Comment down below the three teams you think will be relegated from the Premier League, and do share your thoughts down in the comments, especially if you are a fan of a Premier League team that is currently in the bottom half of the table. As I say, it's really starting to get interesting. The final thing to do then before we get into things, guys, is make sure you've hit the thumbs up button. Let's go for 500 likes. Come on, it's free to hit the thumbs up button. Make sure to drop a like as we get into this video, and if you've not already subscribed, make sure to subscribe for your Premier League fix. We talk all things Premier League and Championship over here, so hit the subscribe button. Without any further ado, let's get into the Premier League relegation battle. So then, right next to me, you can see the bottom half of the Premier League table. Now, one thing I want to just quickly point out before we really start going into some of the stats and numbers and fixtures and things to look out for is that this time the waters are murky when it comes to FFP and possible points deductions. We do know that Nottingham Forest and Everton have been charged. Whether they are found guilty is a different matter, and whether they are punished is a different matter. Lots of people saying it's highly likely, and if that is the case, the probability is high it would be this season, probably around April time, depending on appeals. Now, that does make things very unclear and very frustrating for people that are fascinated by this, and especially that are involved in this. For example, if you're a Luton Town fan, if you're a Nottingham Forest fan, if you're an Everton fan, you're not actually sure where your team is because of possible points deductions coming up for a couple of the teams down here. It would be very naive to just assume that Everton and Nottingham Forest will definitely both get 10-point deduction in April. I won't lie, I do think the chances of something like that happening is very real, but if we're going to deal with facts and numbers only, we've got to take things for how they are right now, and this is the Premier League table, but we do know that there could be points deductions coming, which, like I say, does make things a little bit unclear. We don't know how safe certain teams are, we don't know what the punishments would be for certain teams, etc, etc. With all that said and done, let's get into what we do know so far. What we do know when it comes to the points is it is very close between a couple of teams here, in particular Everton, Luton Town and Nottingham Forest, and also Brentford as well. Just making a general observation of this, whether you're someone who's invested in the Premier League or not, Sheffield United are certainly a cause for concern right now, and the mood around the place, the results do reflect that. I've said for a little while this season that Sheffield United have got a little bit of hope, and while it's still not mathematically impossible that they could still stay up, I think we are starting to look at Sheffield United being a Championship team next season, and maybe that's where their preparations will be. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're completely done yet. I don't think you can put a fork in them just yet. I do think Chris Wilder's capable of picking up a few more points between now and the end of the season, and if I was a Sheffield United fan, I'd just take it game by game. Let's just see if we can finish not bottom of the table, and if we get to 19th with a couple of games to go, let's just see where we are then. But the reality is, if you're going to lose games 8-0, 5-0, 6-0, you just haven't really got a chance of staying up. The goal difference is tragic. The points total is not very good. They've got 15 games left, and if they could just get more than 1 point from those 15 games, it will mean that they're not the worst Premier League team ever, as that record still belongs to Derby County with 11 points, of course. But one thing I did quickly want to say with Sheffield United is I saw a lot of people trying to criticise the Sheffield United fans on social media over the weekend when they were 3-0 down after half an hour at home and their fans are starting to walk out. The thing is, every fan is entitled to their own opinion. I think if you've paid for your ticket, you're well within your rights to stay till the end or leave when you please. And to be honest, I don't blame some of the Sheffield United fans. We've seen this so many times this season where they've been absolutely pasted and they just knew there wasn't a way back in that game. The frustrating thing is with Sheffield United is there has been little glimpses this season where they've run good teams close and just lost by 1 goal in the final minute, but there has been some right poundings, and right now I don't think Sheffield United have much of a chance at all of getting out of this. Just above Sheffield United in 19th place are Burnley. Now, Burnley are only 3 points better off than Sheffield United, but I do think they have a stronger chance of staying up, and that's not just because they've got 3 extra points, but there is that little bit more about them, maybe just a little bit more togetherness with them coming up as a team with company last season, whereas Sheffield United have changed the manager and they haven't been pasted maybe as much as Sheffield United. The goal difference reflects that. It's still the second worst in the division, But like I say, with them being a little bit closer on the points as well, Burnley aren't out of this just yet. but they do need some results soon. And I'm talking, you know, a win and a draw over a 2-game sample size. You really need to push the points up with a couple of games. You can't have this sporadic win, loss, loss, draw, loss, win, loss, loss. There's got to be just that little bit more consistency, just a few more results chucked on top, sprinkled on top, and Burnley might find themselves getting out of this. The interesting thing is Burnley and Sheffield United haven't been great this season, but one of them, possibly both of them, could be saved by possible points deductions. Everton, Luton and Nottingham Forest are the 3 most interesting teams here, because they're the 3 teams closely packed together around the relegation borderline. It looks like it's going to be very close this season between these 3. Things could still spread out over the next 15 or 16 games. Let's start with Everton. Everton have now slipped back into the bottom 3. I don't think they've done anything too badly wrong recently. Maybe they've not won, you know, many games over the last 5 or 6. They've had a couple of draws, and with them drawing and losing, Luton Town have just gone past them as their form has started to improve. Now, by no means do I think this is it for Everton. They're doomed. Look, they're 1 point away, and if you added the 10 points back on, it would reflect that they're a mid-table team. It's not a comfortable position for Everton to be in, I must say, and like I say, with a possible second points deduction coming, that could doom Everton. It is also worth saying at the same time they are still appealing the first points deduction, so we could see points being added back on and then taken away again. It's all too confusing right now, and we don't actually know the full ins and outs, and we might not do until later in the season. But for now, Sean Dyche has to do the business on the pitch. And is Sean Dyche doing the business? Yes, I know they're in the bottom 3 at the moment, and it looks like it will be close, but I'd say Sean Dyche is doing, you know, a decent job, really. He's brought them together, and there is that real sort of fire in Everton's belly that they can get over the line again. I think the advantage Everton have here over the whole of the bottom 7 or 8 really is they have obviously been in the Premier League the longest, but they've been in the Premier League relegation battles the most over recent seasons, and they've survived the most over recent seasons. Obviously still no relegations to their name in the Premier League era, and although Everton are a big club that shouldn't really associate themselves with being in relegation battles, and it's not exactly positive times at Everton, they have become the masters of just keeping their Premier League place, and I'm sure Everton fans will settle for that again this season. The big picture is here for Everton. If they can get all of the points deductions and punishments out of the way this season and still stay up, that would be incredible before they start to look forwards with the new stadium and everything. If they are hit with the points deductions and get relegated, then once again they can see it as a fresh start going again. But right now, being in the thick of a relegation battle and with the uncertainty of what points are going to be taken off or added back on, it's a bit of a weird place to be right now for an Everton fan. In 17th place, you've got Luton Town, and I am so happy to see them giving it a go. It seemed a couple weeks ago that it looked like it would be between Forest, Everton and Luton, but Luton might just be the team that's unlucky and falls short. Now it feels like the balance has started to shift, and at least in my opinion anyway, I'm starting to think Luton have a better chance of staying up than they do of actually going down. Now, I'm not saying Luton Town fans get carried away just yet, because there's still a lot of hard work to do. But given the fact they're currently above the bottom 3, their form is the best out of all the teams in the bottom 8, they've got a game in hand, and there still could be extra points deductions for 16th and 18th placed Forest and Everton. Things are looking up here for Luton, and they could find themselves in a very decent position come the end of the season. First things first, get over the line. But if they do it with a few games to go, what's to say Luton Town could finish above the bottom 4 or 5? That'd be incredible. But like I say, take it one game at a time. One thing I must say though is credit to Luton Town for sticking at it despite everyone writing them off. Credit to Rob Edwards as well. I mean, at the start of this season, everyone was saying, they've not brought in enough players. It looks like they're happy to go down and then come back up next season. No, Luton Town are looking more like a Premier League team than the other teams that they came up with. I mean, the table reflects that. Luton Town, they're in a solid position at the moment. Nottingham Forest are in 16th place, a position that's become synonymous with Nottingham Forest. It is where they finished last season, and will it be where they finish this season? I'm sure Nottingham Forest fans would snap your hand off for it. Right now, I do think Nottingham Forest are in a very fragile position. This is a little bit precarious for Nottingham Forest fans, because it does feel like they are one bad weekend away from being in the bottom 3, one good weekend away from being 5 points clear of the bottom 3. What certainly won't be helping the anxiety of Nottingham Forest fans is the looming possibility of a points deduction, which really could ruin Forest's season. You must say though at the same time, if them and Everton are punished for the same thing, they will get the same punishment, which means let's say Everton and Forest both did get a 10-point deduction, they'd both move down 10 points, but Forest would still have that 2-point gap over Everton that they have right now. Either way, I do think it's going to be desperately close here for Forest. It's also worth saying with Nottingham Forest, there are a few other factors in play here. Obviously, there is a possible points deduction. We must say at the moment they have been missing a couple players to the Africa Cup of Nations. They've also brought in a couple players during the January transfer window, so they've still got the full team to be knitted together. And Nuno is still relatively new, despite him being there for over a month now. We've not had all too many Premier League games because we've had FA Cup weekends. There's been a little winter break as well. I still think it's quite early to judge Nuno, but right now, if you were to ask me, has it been the right decision to replace Cooper with Nuno? Yes, the results do reflect that. It's still too early to say if he's going to be enough to keep them up, and I suppose we won't ever know the answer to if Steve Cooper would have kept Nottingham Forest up this season. But what I will say right now, when I look at Nottingham Forest, Luton Town and Everton, Luton and Everton maybe just have that little bit more togetherness because Luton Town have come up with Rob Edwards, stuck with him, lots of players still there from the EFL days. Everton have had Sean Dyche for a little while now, they're very familiar to being in these positions, whereas with Nottingham Forest, Nuno is still relatively new in the job and there is some new-ish players coming in here as well. So Nottingham Forest just at the moment don't seem to have as much togetherness, but that's something that should come with time, and there's still 4 months of the season to go. Before we move on to the next thing, I do want to highlight Brentford, Crystal Palace and Fulham. I'm going to draw the line pretty much there with the 3 London teams. I don't think Chelsea and Bournemouth are going to be in trouble. Yes, they've not got to the magic 35, 36 points yet, but I don't see them messing up that bad in the latter stages of the season. With Fulham, I think they should be okay this season, but you know, when you're 13th or 14th at this stage of the season, you're just 3 or 4 defeats in a row away from being considered back in the relegation fight. Palace, 2 points worse off than Fulham, so keep an eye on them. Certainly not as much togetherness there. I would say with Fulham, they're behind Marco Silva, whereas with Crystal Palace, quite a few fans not too happy with Hodgson there. And as for Brentford, Brentford are the anomaly here. Now, most people, including myself, would imagine Brentford should get away with this, especially with the return of Ivan Toney. But one thing I will say is their form hasn't been good for a little while now, and although it does look like they've got 2 games in hand on everyone, both of those games in hand are against Manchester City. One of those games being tonight and the other one being away from home in a couple of weeks' time. That's not me saying Brentford are in massive amounts of trouble, but that's not me saying that they're completely safe just yet. They find themselves at a crossroads at the moment, and my gut tells me Brentford probably should be okay, but a couple bad results and Brentford could find themselves below possibly a Forest or a Luton in the next coming games. And one thing you've got to say with relegation battles is, who predicted Leicester to go down at the start of last season? Weird things can happen. Teams you don't expect to go down can go down. So just watch this space, and if a team's on a bad run, they can get sucked in. Let's remove 11th and 12th place Chelsea and Bournemouth and narrow things down to the bottom 8 and look at their form over the last 8 games. We're going to have a look at some of the stats and numbers here. So as you can see, over the last 8 games, Fulham have picked up 8 points. 1 point per game, that's fine. The same for Crystal Palace, although it's not totally inspiring, it will keep them out of trouble. Brentford, just 6 points in their last 8 games. I know they've only just got Ivan Toney back, and that should lead to them picking up more points, but at the moment, it's not great. Nottingham Forest, 8 points from their last 8 games. The majority of that has now been under Nuno, so it does point towards him just maybe getting them over the line this season. Luton Town, the best form out of all the teams in the bottom 8 here, 11 points in their last 8 games. Everton, just above a point per game there, and as you can see, Burnley and Sheffield United's form doesn't suggest that they're going to climb away from the bottom 2 anytime soon. It could change, of course, but right now they do look rooted in that bottom 2. So then, if we use the form from the last 8 games for all of the teams in the bottom 8 here as a sample size for their points per game for the final run-in for the season, then this is a table we'll get with who gets how many points come the end of the season. And it really is quite interesting. I know some people are going to point out that form will change, and I agree with that, but we're just looking at this nonetheless. Luton Town will climb themselves all the way towards mid-table here with 42 points. Fulham will also get over 40 points. Palace will get to 39, which is just enough to keep them out of trouble. Then it is very close here. Everton just ahead of Forest because of the better goal difference. Forest just ahead of Brentford here by 1 point, and Brentford joining Burnley and Sheffield United going going down. What's interesting is the big gap there between Brentford and the bottom two. Both Burnley and Sheffield United stinking it out down the bottom there. One thing obviously that hasn't factored in though is a possible points deduction. So if this was to play out, which I'm not saying it will necessarily, but it's just based on the form recently, and then there was a points deduction on top, both Forest and Everton would be sucked into that bottom three, and it could come down to goal difference between those two, in which case Everton's is actually better. Anyway then, that was just a bit of fun. Let's look forwards now and see the bottom 8 teams in the Premier League, their next 6 fixtures, and here they are in order, starting with 13th, 14th, 15th and 16th. Fulham have Bournemouth at home, Villa at home, Man United away, Brighton at home, Wolves away and Tottenham at home. A bit of a mixed bag there. They're not playing any teams below them in the table, but 4 of their next 6 games coming up are at home. So I do think Fulham will continue to churn points out at a decent rate. As for Crystal Palace, it's Chelsea at home, followed up by Everton away and Burnley at home, which are 2 big games there. Spurs away, Luton at home and Newcastle at home, which is also 4 home games in Crystal Palace's next 6 games. What's quite interesting though is the head-to-heads with Everton, Burnley and Luton. If Palace find themselves not winning those games, they will find themselves getting sucked into the relegation battle. As for Brentford, you can see it's very tricky here. Manchester City at home, Wolves away, Liverpool at home, Man City away, West Ham away and Chelsea at home. Now those next 6 games do look very difficult here for Brentford, which could actually see them fall into the bottom 4 or possibly bottom 3 during those games. Not to rule out that Brentford could get some points against some of the top teams here, but it's a very difficult next few games coming for Brentford. Obviously, with that said though, their fixtures should get a bit nicer the later into the season we go, and I do think, like I say, with Ivan Toney returning, Brentford should start to climb. As for Forest, it's Newcastle at home, West Ham at home, Villa away, Liverpool at home, and then Brighton and Luton away. It looks pretty tricky on paper here for Nottingham Forest, but 3 of their next 4 games are at home. I know they've got Newcastle, West Ham and Liverpool, but maybe if they can just get a win in one of them and a draw in another one of them, that will just about keep them clear of trouble. Aston Villa away looks very tricky, so too does Brighton away. Luton away is a massive head-to-head. That will be a big game. As for the next 4 teams then, Luton Town have Sheffield United at home, Manchester United at home, Villa at home, Palace away, Forest at home and Spurs away. You can't fail to notice that 4 of Luton's next 5 games are at home, including the next 3 and in particular the Sheffield United game. Luton Town's run has been good recently, possibly could be extended with these fixtures here. Luton Town have been going toe-to-toe with some of the top teams, and they've also got teams around them which, if they beat, would be massive results. As for Everton, it's Manchester City away, Palace at home, Brighton away, West Ham at home, Man United away and Liverpool at home. Not the easiest away games, I must say, with both of the Manchester clubs and Brighton on the road. I must say though, with the Palace and West Ham home games, real opportunities there for Everton to get some points on the board. Now that Everton find themselves in the bottom 3, they've got to be looking at trying to target a minimum of 2 wins from the next 6 games just to keep themselves close to the points per game mark. Can Everton get out of it? I think it's going to be close, but I do have a feeling they might just do it based on the experience. As for Burnley and Sheffield United, well, it's difficult for Burnley here in their next 2 games. Liverpool away and Arsenal at home. Burnley might find themselves just hoping that teams around them don't pick up points while they face these difficult games themselves. After that, it's a run of Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham and Brentford. 4 games on paper that Burnley really can attack. There's no doubt about it. Burnley have to go for wins with the position they are in, and if they can win 3 of those final 4 games there, they will drag themselves past 20 points and possibly into contention as we go into the final 10 games. And finally, with Sheffield United, there's no doubt about it, it has to be wins, starting at Kenilworth Road. For any Sheffield United fans that still think there is a chance, it has to be a win at Kenilworth Road on Saturday. Won't be the easiest game, knowing that Luton have already won at Sheffield United's ground this season, Bramall Lane. Now they have to go away there knowing that Luton Town are in good form and will be going for the win themselves. After that, Sheffield United host Brighton, who they've already lost 5-2 at home to in the FA Cup. Then it's an away trip to Wolves, a home game against Arsenal, an away trip to Bournemouth and an away trip to Manchester United. It's not looking easy for Sheffield United. They've got to start scoring points now. So then, what are my overall feelings on the Premier League relegation battle? What is my hunch right now? Well, I don't want to ever write anyone off, but I must say right now, I really can't see many ways out here for Burnley and Sheffield United in particular, but it would be nice if they can put some results together to make it a competitive battle. As for the teams above the bottom three, as we said, I think Chelsea and Bournemouth, they're fine. I think Fulham should be okay. Crystal Palace are possibly sleepwalking into trouble, but might still just have enough to get over the line with the likes of Elise and Eze in the ranks. As for Brentford, they could be the surprise team to go down this season, which was Leicester City last season, and does prove that anyone really can go down. I do have a strong feeling though that they should stay up with the likes of Ivan Toney there, and I still think Thomas Frank's a good manager, and the rest of the team's very good as well. They aren't just a one-man team. But right now they do find themselves in a precarious position with some difficult games coming. And then it's incredibly close between Forest, Luton and Everton. And right now I can't call it, especially not knowing if there are going to be points deductions for Forest and Everton. Do I think they will get a points deduction? I'm not certain, but I do think it's quite likely considering they have been charged now. But if you asked me to pick between Luton, Forest and Everton who's going down, I genuinely wouldn't answer it. It's just too close right now. You could flip a coin, you could play rock, paper, scissors for it. It's that close. Guys, share your thoughts down in the comments. Is it going to be one from these three out of Forest, Luton and Everton? Or could you see teams below them getting back into it and teams above them possibly falling into it? If you've enjoyed the video, do make sure you've shared your thoughts in the comments. Dropped a like and subscribed. We're going to leave it there for today with the Premier League relegation battle. Looks like it could go to the wire. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.